In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast, my co-host Leif, Thulin, and I, we are going to discuss who had the loudest introductions in the opening week of the college basketball season. Like I've been saying for the past week or so, college basketball is here. I'm excited to finally talk about games as opposed to talking about what a guy did last year, what he did in high school. So in this episode, we are going to discuss, again, the top guys that stood out in the first week of the 23-24 college basketball season. Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board. And my co-host is Leif Thulin, the guy that watches more college basketball than anyone else. So you know Leif has been super busy over the last 7 days. But before we get started, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA, but you got to use all lowercase for the Locked On NBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Also, please like, share, subscribe. That is the best way to help us grow this YouTube channel because we are going to bring you draft takes, college basketball takes 5 days a week for the next 5-6 months until the NBA draft. And so this is your best place for NBA draft coverage. All right, let's just get started, Leif. First of all, what game stood out to you the most so far in this early part of the season? I know you talked about the Kansas State USC game the last time we did an episode. Was that the game that really caught your attention, or was there another game?
Well, that was the opening day's best game, and I don't think the game itself was very impressive, but Isaiah Collier certainly was. So right off the bat, I'll start off with him as someone who, whenever he was in the game, there was no doubt of, hey, am I looking for the NBA guy? You knew exactly who it was. And he played like one, in control, got to his spots, shot it well, got to the rim, he showed his ability to score from all three phases, pass the ball, and showed defensive chops that were solid. And I don't think that's been, something that everyone talks about. Everyone talks about, he's a lead guard who can go to the rim and pass. And I think he passed all those with flying colors. But I think there was more there that was obvious against what was a high major team that was a 3 seed last year. And I know they lost some talent, but that's a team that should be eventually pretty solid. And then I thought Baylor and Auburn was actually the best game I've seen so far outside of Duke and Arizona. But Duke and Arizona, I felt like we're more known commodities in terms of prospect watching. JaKobe Walter, what an introduction. I mean, he shot the lights out. He showed a diversity with which he could score. And he may be right hand dominant. Like, that would be my knock on him. Everything he does, he gets back to his right hand. But man, was he good against some physical, quick guards. And that was a high quality game. 88-83 in the second day of the season is pretty hard to watch. Like, some of those games are pretty hard to watch. This one was not hard to watch at all. It's hard to score that much in college basketball at the beginning when there's lacking of continuity.
I want to talk about Isaiah Collier. One of the things that really stood out to me is that, like you said, you know who the NBA prospect is. You know exactly when he's on the floor because he's always making something happen. Do you think that there is a clear opportunity for him to be the number one pick in what is considered a wide open draft?
I think there's an opportunity. I wouldn't put my metaphorical money on it, just because I think so much is put on the two-way wings and the creators, and there are some guys that fit that mold, even though they aren't seen as can't miss prospects. Like, so Justin Edwards, who personally I'm a little torn on, and Ron Holland, who I prefer over Edwards, I think are more alluring to executives right now than Isaiah Collier. But I think he's gotten a chance to have a very he'll have a lot of attention on his performances playing at USC alongside Bronny, all this hype. And there's going to be a chance that because he's seen a lot and centrally located, the USC is a marquee school, obviously for football, for basketball, it'll be big. They could make a big run because they have a talented team. And I think he could play himself into the discussion right now. I think he's on the outside looking in, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, even though it's a weaker class. I just think there's so much of a focus on taking those jumbo size creators or a two-way wings. And it's just a little bit less of an appeal to get a guy who's a 6'4" point guard.
I think there's a chance. I mean, if you've watched the two Ignite games, Ron Holland doesn't look like a number one pick. I've actually had, and I won't say the comparison, but I talked to someone, and I've talked to multiple scouts over the last few days. And one of the things that one guy says, look, I know what a number one pick looks like. Ron Holland doesn't look like a number one pick. And then another scout is saying, like, I don't see it. I don't see it at all. And then maybe Edwards, but there's concerns about his shooting a little bit. So I think this is wide open. And I think Collier has a chance simply because, one, I think he might be 6'5". And you can make a case and say that he could have the most impact on his team out of all the players in this draft class, because USC is going to go as he goes. You know he can pass. You know that he can get downhill. And I just think that there is a chance. And just like the scouts I've talked to, I mean, they're just so worried about this class, especially if you're picking at the top. Because one scout said, I think this is like 2013 all over again. And you could draft a guy number one, and he's going to have huge flaws, and you could end up basically losing your job because somebody that is probably going to come out of nowhere that we're not talking about, that's probably not going to be in the lottery, is going to end up being the best player in this class since it's so wide open. So I do think that Isaiah Collier has a chance to go number one. Let's talk about JaKobe Walter. So he had a phenomenal opening game, and then the numbers weren't impressive at all in the second game. What were your thoughts on, I know you talked about the phenomenal first game, but what were your thoughts on the huge contrast between game one and game two?
Well, I think game one, he burst onto the scene in a nationally televised game against Auburn, who I don't think is incredible, but they do have the athleticism to present issues. And so I really value the fact that he had a lot of ease with which he scored. He went 7 of 13 to score 28 points. He shot 10 free throws, made all 10 of them. He hit multiple threes. He got to the mid-range. He is right-hand dominant, like I mentioned. But that stood out to me that he was able to do so against older, more physical guards that are on the caliber athleticism. And in his second game, I actually watched some of it. John Wayne is who they played. And I watch a ton of college basketball. I had never seen or heard of John Wayne as the school. Like that to me is more like an old school reference, not necessarily a school. And I watched a bit of the game, and you could just see the disparity athletically. They could get out in transition and run and score. So it was very heavily controlled by Ray J. Dennis and Nunn, the other two players in that backcourt, who would just get out, run, and score. And so Walter didn't have a necessity to score. And I don't think he had the same aggressive chops that you saw him demonstrate in game one that he had in game two. So I'm actually not concerned by the disparity in the box score.
Okay, that's fair. All right, let's talk about Stephon Castle. You mentioned him in the open. What do you think of his performance, and has the two games that they've played changed like your mind on him coming into the season?
I didn't really know what to expect from him coming into the season, so I wouldn't say he's swayed me too much either way so far, just because I didn't have a strong feel as to where I would have him. Like, I think a lot of my expectations are tempered just because of my knowledge for the class being lower. So I kind of have this idea of who's who, but not necessarily of oh, here's what I expect from this type of player compared to a relative class, which is how I typically do it. I'll usually be like, oh, like this guy is about as good as this guy from a previous class. I think this year it's more of an amalgamation of, oh, these guys are the best of a bad class. And it's not necessarily fair to them, but it's just the way my mind works. I would say I'm not surprised. He filled the box score. Like, that's what he did in his previous outing. He scored, and he was efficient. He was 5 of 7, I believe, which, you'd maybe want to see more volume. We'll see if when UConn plays better teams, how much he's involved as opposed to what Tristan Newton does, how it impacts Klingon, Caravan, all these guys. They've got a lot of mouths to feed. I'm curious to see how well he scores when game plans with athletes that can execute the game plans to thwart him. I'm curious to see the way he reacts to that, because I think he's got an upside of being a jumbo creator, like I said, are very coveted.
Any concerns about his lack of speed and burst? I had one of the listeners comment that Castle's lack of speed, or he said he's just too slow for him. Do you have any concerns about that?
It's hard because who they've played hasn't been able to expose that. Right now, I don't have a great feel as to how well NBA athletes look compared to him, like how well they move compared to him. Because if I were to compare him to some of those guys that are in the mold that I discussed, there's a few of them that aren't super fleet of foot. They use more guile and strength. And so it's possible. But that said, when you're playing competition that's inferior, and then you have to resort to guile, that is a concern. But he hasn't had to do that yet. Everything's been easy for him thus far. And he put up big numbers against bad teams, and he did so 5 of 7. So I don't really care how he puts up those numbers until I see him have to adjust to a Big East game plan or non-conference. And they play a great non-conference. So I think the verdict is still out on Stephon Castle.
Yeah, obviously, it's still out on everybody. It's really early. All right, when we return, we're going to talk about a few other prospects and some games, most notably the Duke-Arizona game and the prospects that played in that game. But let's talk about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. And with basketball season here, you can now pick a combo of projections across football and basketball from the Specials League. The Specials League is a league that is created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, you can have LeBron James plus Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made and receptions, or you can play what they call the Community Plays League. You can play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like Meek Mill, who just dropped an album with Rick Ross. Then there's comedian Andrew Schultz. And in the Community Plays promo, you get to view the entries of some of the biggest names in the Prize Pick community as well. Also, they have a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game early in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. And Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. It has to be all lowercase. And if you use the promo code LockedOnNBA, you can get a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, once again, big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen. Again, basketball season is here. We're going to be talking about basketball all over the world. If you're watching on YouTube and you notice that I am not at home, I am actually in Paris, France. I've watched 3 games in 2 days. I actually went to watch Melvin Ajinka and Zachary Risachet. I'm in France and I've been pronouncing the names like an American, and then I learned that the ER in French makes an A. And so I went to watch those 2 guys play, and actually I'm going to write about it on NBABigBoard.com. So please check out NBABigBoard.com. It is my newsletter. It is a subscription-based newsletter. And the money is used to help support my travel so I can give you the most unique draft coverage because I am all over the place. I was actually supposed to go see Tidjane Salaam today, and it was such a difficult journey to get from Paris to Cholet. It was like a 3-hour train ride. And then because the games here start late, I would have had to stay in a hotel and then get a train back in the morning and so on. And then I got word that he's sick. I'm like, I'm not about to go on a 3-hour journey after I went 2 hours yesterday, actually 4 hours round trip to watch Ajinka and Risachet play. So I won't be able to cover T. John Salon, at least watch him live in person on this trip, but I will be back home in a couple days. So anyway, enough about me. Let's talk about the Arizona and Duke game. Kyle Filipowski had a monster performance, and I actually saw this breakdown on Twitter about Arizona's defense and what they did to limit Duke, and basically they they did something on the pick and roll coverage because Duke scored on pick and pops early in the game. They took that away, and then they just left Mark Mitchell open. They let Barlowe guard Mark Mitchell, left him open because they don't trust his shooting. And then that played a role in Arizona getting the W. But Kyle Filipowski, 8. What do you have, 25 points? Like 25?
Yeah, 25.
8. What were your thoughts on Filipowski performance and him as the NBA prospect overall?
I think he's a very good college basketball player. My concern about his NBA prospects is he the defender that you want him to be in space that would compensate for his lack of traditional bulk on the interior and not a rim protector? And yes, every second on the broadcast, they bring up his hip surgery. Mm-hmm. And so maybe he's more mobile now. And that was my big knock, because I didn't think he was very mobile last year. I thought he was a poor defender. Mm-hmm. So I don't think you could really see it in this game because Oumar Ballo is who he guarded for most of the game. And yep. Oumar Ballo, for those of you who don't know, is a very traditional back to the basket big guy who also runs the floor and just like gets leak outs. So you didn't really see him have to switch. You saw him hedge a little bit. You saw him drop a little bit. So I think I still have concerns there until I see that his hips have improved in terms of the flexibility and ability to slide. That said, he can really shoot. He's a skilled player. And in a class that I've mentioned I perceive to be weaker, he can be a first-round pick, absolutely. I don't see the lottery as some projections do. Mm-hmm. I just feel like the role in the NBA for him is less, as we're seeing guys like, for instance, Duke players, Lively and Mark Williams, who are centers right now, are tremendous athletes who are scoring well because they're getting easy shots and they're defending the basket. Those are far more valuable to me than the archetype of Filipowski. And I think they would score more than Filipowski would in the NBA, despite Filipowski being the far more well-regarded offensive player.
Yeah, the conversation around Filipowski is definitely mixed. I've talked to a couple scouts about him. And one scout mentioned that last year, Filipowski's hips were so bad that he couldn't even get in his stance. And they were concerned about, anytime you have hip surgery, that's one thing. But when you have like double hip surgery, so that's one thing that some of the scouts are going to pay attention to this year. Can he defend in space? Because he should be more mobile, but they said last year the hips were bad. Then I had another very, very respectable basketball mind say that he thought Filipowski was an NBA player coming into his freshman year. And then after last year, he thought this guy is going to be a very, very good European player, which makes that interesting is that Filipowski had a really good year. He was the most productive. Wasn't he like the best freshman in the country last year, at least as far as productivity?
Other than Brandon Miller,
right? Yeah. Especially out of Duke's loaded class. On one hand, you can say he was very productive and he wasn't healthy. He had 2 bad hips and he shot the ball horribly, and he still had a really good freshman season. So I can see both sides of the argument. What do you think he needs to do this year to improve his draft stock?
I think the main thing would be just show that you can either hedge, that you can slide in space a little bit. So the same thing I mentioned about the hip flexibility defensively, because before even knowing that he had hip issues, that was my main knock. I was like, he cannot move at all. And it was bad. And he was playing alongside Derek Lively, which made them a good defense because Derek Lively could clean everything up behind him. Yep. And Mark Mitchell's a terrific 3 as a defender, and as a 4, he's a very good defender as well. But especially when you have that enormous of a front court, he was able to be hidden. But if you watched him, you would be like, man, this guy cannot defend a lick. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is you'd like him to shoot better percentages, but I actually don't care that much about it just because I see the stroke. I believe he can shoot. I'm typically someone that, I mean, we've had this discussion about numerous players. We had this discussion at the combine together in person about players that look like they can shoot versus the percentages.
Coleman Hawkins.
Yeah, that's exactly who I was about to reference. I think he's a guy who can shoot, and it will be shown by his free throw percentage, and it should be shown by his 3-point percentage this year because he'll be playing the 5 and he should get good looks. That said, I'd like to see that percentage go up, and then I'd like to see what can he do as a passer. He's going to be a focal point of this offense. Proctor's the guy who's going to orchestrate it all, but can Filipowski be a supplementary passer? Can he? And I don't love to do these type of comparisons in terms of they typically align racially, but could he be someone like Kel'el, who's a hub for passing? Like he's a secondary playmaker who's on the court. Can he space the floor, but not only as a shooter, but can he create for others, which makes him more valuable on the offensive side of the ball, which is what will be his strong suit. No matter how much his hips improve, offense is his calling card.
Okay, that's a fair assessment. All right, when we return, we can finish out talking about Kentucky. I actually want to talk to you about some of the guys that haven't been playing. Like there's a group of freshmen that were highly touted that just have not been getting the minutes that we thought. But let's talk about Jace Medical. Jace has a Jace case, which provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. And all it takes to get a Jace case is to fill out a simple online form. And in some cases, you just jump on a quick call with one of their board-certified physicians. You can get ongoing care from their physicians on any treatment-related questions. It is doctor-created and doctor-recommended. So do not be caught unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. And Jace handles everything from online evaluations to licensed pharmacy medication to delivery and ongoing consultation and care. And why it's so important to have a Jace case is just because there's so much going on as far as just, different things in the world that could have an impact on supply chain issues. And then also Jace is offering a 1-year supply of ED medications. You are covered, so you do not have to worry about whether or not you can refill your generic versions of Cialis, Viagra prescriptions. And all of this is possible because of Jace Medical. So go online right now at jacemedical.com to receive your 12-month supply on your daily medication. And remember to use the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. Once again, that is Jace Medical, JASE medical.com. All right, last segment. We left off talking about the Kentucky trio. And when they get healthy, that's going to be a lot of minutes and a lot of mouths to feed once they get Zvonimir Ivisic back. You got Aaron Bradshaw, who I think is a lottery pick. You got Ghana Onyenso, who some people think is a first-round pick. I mean, they have a lot of talent, and I don't know if all the pieces fit together like, some of the prior years. So that's going to be something to monitor throughout the year. All right, let's talk about Kentucky. They played 2 games. What are your thoughts on Kentucky's 3 freshmen that are playing that are projected? Well, some have them projected as first-round picks. I mean, Rob Dillingham is, some people don't, some do. But let's just say between Dillingham, DJ Wagner, and Justin Edwards, if you had to give a grade on those 3 combined, what would that be?
Man, I have no idea, because I came into this season thinking, before I watched them scrimmage, I was like, okay, Wagner's the guy I think it should be the best college player of the bunch. Edwards right now is probably the best prospect, and Dillingham's the wild card. Like, he reminds me of Terquavion Smith.
You see, Terquavion took 33 shots in his G League
Richard texted me immediately and said, you got to see what Terquavion's stat line was. So I did see that. But he reminds me of him in the good way and the bad way, that you never know what you're going to get. And he could be a spark plug scorer, but he also could shoot you out of game. It's kind of the reputation that I'd heard. So I watched the scrimmage. He scores 40, and Wagner gets to his spots, but didn't look particularly explosive. His jump shots, it's in between good and bad.
He's shooting 16. I mean, it's 2 games now. I know it's early. 16.7% from 3, 50% from the foul line.
I'm just saying in terms of the scrimmage, and this is the assessment. Then watching them play actual basketball, Edwards has the easiest path to being the top pick of these
Mm-hmm.
guys, but I just don't see it. Like he doesn't dribble well. Like he doesn't dribble well. He's a good athlete, but he's not a great athlete. He's his jump shot is all right, and I don't know. I'm a skeptic compared to where some people have him, including yourself. I listened to your podcast with you and James, and I listened to it after I'd watched them play, so I'd kind of already formed my assessment. I tried to listen to it with an open mind with both sides, and I'm somewhere in between the two of you
Yeah, I mean the
on
jump shot
Edwards.
is the key. The jump shot is the key. And so far, I don't think he's shooting the ball well from three. This class is weird, man. Like scouts again that I've talked to are just like they do not like this class. Like I said, one guy was like, "Look, there's going to be three guys that come out of nowhere in this class, and one of those three guys could end up being the best player in this draft." And he referred to 2013. So if I'm not mistaken, that was like Giannis and CJ McCollum. They were like, I think they'd be the top two players draft in a redraft from that class. I can't think off the top of my head. But yeah, Justin Edwards is shooting just 25% from three. I don't have the actual. Oh, so he's basically 2 for 8, but he was two for
Yeah, he's
five
two.
one game and 0
Yeah,
for
he's
3
two
the
for
other game.
8, and he's shooting just over 50% from the field.
And I feel like a lot all his points have been just like in transition. I know he had like one pull up baseline jumper. Dillingham. What are your thoughts on Dillingham? Other than like Turquavion, do you think he is an NBA? Do you think he's worthy of a first round pick?
I I don't want to give a strong feel either way on this. I would say in this class he could be worth a flyer. I need to see how well he creates against real competition though. Like does his quickness that you see against Texas A&M Commerce show against Texas A&M
I think so.
without the Commerce? I think he's got that jitterbug quickness, but I need to see if he sees the floor when there's other players that move similarly to him. When there's rim protectors that can actually influence he's trying to do, both passing and shooting the ball. So he's the one I have the least feel for. And Wagner's disappointed me in terms of his swing skill. We all knew his jump shooting, and he's been poor. But at the same time, I wonder if he's one of those type of guys that can impact a game and control a game, because Calipari seems to have this trust for him that's just ingrained, regardless of
Yeah.
what's been given there. He just seems to have it.
I mean, that's one thing that a lot of people feel like I mean, there's a prior relationship there, so he is going to get the first. You know what I mean? Like he's going to be the guy that's going to eat and be taken care of first. Let's talk about Omaha Blue, who is not playing a lot. I think Iowa State had a game today, or maybe they're playing as we're recording, but he is someone that a lot of people are high on, and he has not really played. Adai Mara, and maybe some of it's because he just got cleared, but he's only played 8.5 minutes per game in the 2 games that he's played. I'm trying to think of somebody else. Kwame Evans has not played a lot. Well, I mean, he's played 22 minutes, but in those 22 minutes in 2 games, he's averaging 4.5 points, 26% from the floor, 16% from the 3-point line. I'm trying to think, is there somebody else that
Mackenzie Mbako has hardly done anything. I don't know how much has to do with his arrest, but he's played one game where he scored 4 points.
Yeah, and he played 19 minutes in that game. What are your thoughts on that? Any of those like really shocking and surprising to you?
Not terribly shocking, and especially in the case of Mara, where it was going to be some growing pains anyway. Plus, he got cleared literally 2 days before they played their first game, so that one doesn't shock me at all. I that one I have a lot to be determined with. I would say Omaha Bilou doesn't stun me either, because Iowa State's weird. Let's just put it this way. Iowa State is a team that plays very aggressive defense, but they don't play at a tremendous pace, which is counterintuitive. And then they often rely on like big guys to orchestrate their offense. They have guards that can't shoot and their bigs can shoot. It's like they're almost inverted. And so I think that it's an awkward landing spot for him as he's a tremendous attacker of the basket. So I think there's going to be some growing pains there. I'm curious to see how he's regarded once we're into the season, especially into Big 12 play where defenses are very stingy in the Big 12. And then Kwame Evans, I saw him play against Georgia, and you could see why he's intriguing. He hit a three, he had a block, but you can also see why. I think I told you I was a little bit of a skeptic coming in. Like his skill set in the Pac-12 seems alluring. But I've seen this story with Oregon before, and so I think you're seeing that again. They've got a lot of guys that are veteran players that can score the basketball at a decent level. They don't necessarily have the skill set that he does, but they're going to get more run. And I think that's kind of where he's in. That's the situation he's in right now.
Did you see any of the Ignite games?
I saw the first one.
What were your thoughts on that game?
I'm still not a Matas Buzelis guy.
Well, he didn't play.
Yeah. So that's my main thought is that I need to be sold, and I just can't get sold until I see something from him, and then he's not there. So Ron Holland, like you said at the outset, not a great showing, but at least he's got a skill set that I can buy being a contributor at the next level. I think I'm higher on
the motor.
I think he's got a great first step. He really gets going towards the rim quickly, and I think he could be taught to pass the ball and create. And then defensively, I think that, like you said, the motor, the rebounding is a skill set that will translate. I'm not saying he's going to the skill set translating to stardom, but I think at least I have a platform with which to work with him. Whereas Buzelis, I think there's more like rare skills there, but I just don't see it. I don't feel like there's this toughness. There's not this nastiness or competitive streak you typically want to see with someone with those skills that you want to be your top scorer.
Yeah, if you combine those two together, you'd have a legitimate number one pick and franchise guy, because what Buzelis has, Holland lacks, and what Holland has, Buzelis definitely lacks. I wish you could combine them. I just want to see how they look when everyone is there. I mean, they got blown out by the Ontario Clippers in the second game. Without a doubt in my mind, Tyler Smith has looked better than everyone on that team. He didn't have the same hype or fanfare coming in, but if you just look at the games and you didn't know who is who, you just watch the game, you say Tyler Smith is the best prospect. In the second game, he was 6 of 9 from the floor, 2 of 4 from deep, 16 points, 5 rebounds. I think in the first game, he didn't really rebound well, but it was a much closer game. It was 109 to 102, but he was phenomenal. I mean, he played 31 minutes, but he was 8 of 9 from the floor, 4 of 4 from deep, 3 assists. 3 rebounds, 1 assist. So you would like him to see him rebound a little bit more, but in 2 games, he's been shooting lights out. And I think that he has a really projectable skill set for the NBA because he is a 6'10", 6'11" shooter, floor spacer. And he's been blocking shots. So I think just based off of 2 games, and I can even say based off of the games from against Perth, and then even in the Intercontinental Cup, if you just use all of those games and you had to make an assessment, you can't tell me that Ron Holland is shown to be 30 to 40 picks better than Tyler Smith based off of what people are projecting.
Yeah, I don't know why Tyler Smith's so low.
He was forgotten about at OTE. All the attention went to the Thompson twins and even like Almanza. I mean, I can't say that he's played well. He hasn't scored in double figures in the 2 games, and a lot of people really like him as a top 5 pick, lottery pick. I mean, Tyler Smith has played better than both of those guys. And it just shows you that sometimes this pre-draft hype can really carry you pretty far. And Tyler didn't have it, but I mean, he's hooping right now.
Could Tyler Smith be this year's Taylor Hendricks, where he kind of emerges? And it's a little bit different. Obviously, Taylor Hendricks was at UCF, but he goes number 9. Could Smith work his way all the way up there because of a skill set that's being coveted by the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, you would hope it's, a better situation. I mean, I think Taylor Hendricks was in a good situation financially, but I don't see where he's going to play in his first contract unless some major changes are made. But I mean, possibly. I mean, I think that, there are some similarities. Taylor was a good shot blocker, and so far Tyler has proven to be a pretty good shot blocker. Tyler's shooting the ball very well. Yeah, I mean, I could see that situation happening. I mean, the thing about Tyler was that he was a top 5 recruit before he goes to OTE. And if I'm just keeping it 100, he goes to OTE and then he kind of disappears in a sense. And the mainstream media, the people that ranked him high, just totally forgot about him. And he just wasn't in people's faces anymore. The numbers were good. I want to say, and I used to know it by the top of my head, but I think his first year at OTE, he finished in the top 5 in 3-point shooting percentage. So he's always been able to shoot. He's always been tall and long. It's just all the attention went to the Thompson twins. I mean, even like Ifan Almansa, I didn't hear much about him at OTE. It's like if he doesn't have those huge summers playing for the national teams, maybe he's even, not being talked about. Well, that wraps up this episode. Once again, thank you, the listener, for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. Me and Leif just shot the breeze and shared our thoughts on a few prospects over the first, has it even been a week yet? I guess it's not officially a week of the college basketball season. We'll definitely have more. I mean, obviously, there were plenty of players that we didn't get a chance to cover. But once again, thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. Once again, it's Rafael with Leif Thulin, and we are out.